Now that we've understood how a product release plan works and how a product is taken from the initial strategy to the adoption and retention stage to the risks that are involved, let's talk about one of the most easily ignored topics, which is retrospect and pitfalls. So, retrospects are essentially a process to analyze the events that led up to the product release. At the retrospect, you will essentially review what happened, what worked, and what didn't work. You should do this as early as possible, but not too early because you will not have enough data to reflect back productively. This is a very good video by Mark Grove where he covers the 5 basic steps in a typical agile retrospective scenario. Okay. So during the retrospective, you will make few observations. You will look at what components made sense, which components didn't work, what can be improved, what needs to be added to the process, and what needs to be removed from the process. Okay. When you're conducting a retrospective session, there are 3 ways of doing it. You can call it that, okay, let's talk about all the components that should be started, or the start, stop, continue. That what is working, we should continue it. What is not working, let's stop it. And what's the new thing that we should start, right? And then you can have a good, bad, better, best sort of a retrospective. You can talk about what is the best, what is better, what is bad, and so on. And then you can have an agile retrospective, which has been described in the current video. Start, stop, continue. This is the most straightforward way to run a retrospective session. How does a retrospective session look? What does a retrospective session look like? Basically, the product was released 2 weeks back. You have collected some amount of data, and now you're conducting a session with your stakeholders, important stakeholders. And there's a whiteboard or some sort of a visual board. It could be a digital board as well. And where you have essentially put 3 columns. Column number 1 is start. Actions we should start taking, because we observed during the entire release planning and the actual shipping and deployment that these things were not good. We actually forgot to remove the dummy content, or we didn't have a very strong content review process, and that's why there were a lot of grammatical mistakes done, or the content was not prepared in time, which delayed our entire release. Stop would be actions that should be removed. So we should stop reviewing, or we should stop taking feedback after every single step. Maybe we should build all the features together, and then we should take a review altogether. And continue actions that should be continued and standardized as is. Typically, you will use a stack of post-its, and you will just stack them together in that column. And by the end of it, you will have a decent idea about what's the cumulative start actions, what are the stop actions, what are the continue actions, right? You would typically use weighted averages or a voting system to decide the most important items out of the start bucket, stop bucket, and continue bucket, and then you will instrument it. But the most important thing is, I've seen people doing retrospectives, but then they don't follow up. They don't actually implement all the learnings that they got from the retrospective, and they don't change their actions. So following up with the start, stop, continue retrospective is super critical and should be done. That is actually much more important than the retrospective itself. Then comes agile retrospective. In agile retrospective, you will do there are essentially 5 stages or 5 layers. First of all, you will set the stage. That is, you will prepare the team for the retrospective discussion. You will set up the agenda, you will set up the calendar, and you will formulate a environment where people can bring up ideas. So, for example, you might choose to exclude certain people, you might choose to include certain people, you might choose to invite ideas much before the actual session, because if the number of stakeholders who are getting into the retrospective meeting are a lot, due to the paucity of time, a lot of them might not be able to present their ideas, right? So allow people to bring up ideas. Then gather the data. So ask every member of your product release team to gather and compile their observations of the release process. This can be done prior to the actual meeting also, and it can be done during the meeting also. Some companies or some people, some teams prefer doing it during the meeting because everybody's engaged in that moment in that retrospective and they can come up with ideas. And certain teams prefer a little more asynchronous approach. Once you have gathered the data, then you will lay down all the major points as post-its, or you will create as post-its or as a digital in a digital environment, and you start making notes of the recurring patterns or the issues shown through the data. A lot of times, what is what is being viewed in at the surface is would typically have a root cause, and when you observe these recurring patterns, it's easy to actually identify the root cause. For example, the root cause may be that, okay, we didn't the reason why content was not so good or came out so late because in general we have not been very good at assigning responsibilities. We thought everybody will be self-organizing and they will be able to do their own job by themselves or figure out what should be done next, but that didn't work in our favor. So from here on out, we will be very accurately, very precisely define the work for every single person and define it as a scope. Then make a decision on how to on the way forward. So decide how you would use this insight to create an action plan, and that should be decided in the retrospective meeting itself. You may choose to brainstorm the solutions. So you can choose to, for example, do all the gathering of the data, insights, everything much earlier. And the meeting, the retrospective meeting, is used to essentially generate insights and brainstorm together. And then finally, you would close the retrospective by again noting it down, documenting it in one common charter so that you can refer it back maybe 2 months down the line, right? And lastly, always remember to thank and praise all your team members no matter what. Okay, if there was during the release plan, during the release cycle or during the product development process, if some people were hurt because of some reason, it's important to acknowledge it and tell them that what has happened. Let's look at a much more productive um, working environment from here on out. Lastly, the good, bad, better, best. It's very similar to start, stop, continue. Good is things that went well, bad things that didn't work well, better opportunities for improvement, and best is these are outstanding performances and we should repeat this more often. And if there are patterns that we can standardize, then amazing. Scheduling retrospectives. Um, there's a very often repeated quote, which is those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, right? So no product release plan is foolproof, and people will make mistakes, miss opportunities, and they will not adhere to rules and processes. So that is why the goal of retrospective is not to blame anyone, but to learn from your mistakes. That you lost your temper, you didn't plan well, you didn't come with the right answers, you were too laid back, and so on. And retrospectives should allow different teams to speak up and voice their opinions and challenges faced during this release. So, as you can imagine, that as a product manager, as an anchor, it's very important that you play the role of improving the empathy and improving the credibility within the team, within that retrospective meeting. Unless and until you do not have that or you're not enabling that, people will not be able to voice their opinions openly. They do not want to hurt others. They do not want to be seen as the negative guy or the person who has the most criticism. And that's why it's important that you position this entire voicing of the opinion as more as an improvement opportunity instead of criticism. When should a retrospective be scheduled? It should be tailored to the entire product roadmap. In the sense, if your roadmap is a quarter long, a 3 month long roadmap, you should have at least 3 to 6 retrospectives depending on what is the release cycle, right? Usually retrospectives are scheduled right after the release of the product. When the release has happened, people are fresh with the things that bothered them, things that they wanted to improve and they had feedback on. So do it immediately, don't delay too much. So release has happened, and the next first thing in fact you should be doing is take a retrospective and just record it down. And then you can take another retrospective maybe after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, to essentially figure out how accurate were your product predictions, that what will work, what will not work. And in general, retrospectives are iterative processes, so be prepared to do it more often. What are the pitfalls? Uh, there's one very good link in the speaker note. Please check that out. Um, well, there are numerous pitfalls to actually list them down, but let me just bucket them into a few points. There are pre-launch pitfalls. There are post-launch pitfalls. Pre-launch would be not investing enough time in market research, in user research. If you have not set up iterative feedback loop, if you have not done good amount of marketing communication, which I've seen so often, people completely forgetting about that. Okay, they need to give ample time upfront to get the content in place, good quality content in place. You need to create videos, you need to create a launch plan, you need to do all of these things. You need to inform the entire company about the new product that you're about to launch, and what impact it can have on their own, on their jobs, on their job roles, or the field or the department that they are handling. Similarly, not planning the release date effectively, releasing it late night, releasing it on a Sunday when people are chilling. So many aspects. Similarly, post-launch pitfalls. Um, Post-launch, you might lose the focus and foresight on customer engagement. So you're not. So you've forgotten about that. Okay, you also have to bother about retention and not just adoption. Um, you might measure too much. You might measure too less. You might underestimate the importance of customer support. You might not involve yourself too much in customer support. The review mail that is sent, you're not reviewing it properly. You're not personalizing it. It's a generic email, or if you're not incentivizing the sharing or liking of a product. Now that the last statement is only valid for certain products, but you get the drift. That these are all connected with the five or six steps that come before retrospect and pitfalls. If you've not done your content job well, if you've not done your launch job well, if you've not done your distribution job well, things will fail, right? So in a nutshell, please do retrospects, and please be careful of the pitfalls. You cannot completely be away from it or completely avoid it, but uh, if you just make a checklist for yourself right now, sit down and just make a checklist, and you refer it before you're doing launch or when you are entering the launch sprint, that after 2 weeks we are about to launch, just have a checklist in place, right? Proactively, and start making sure that okay, do you have everything in place? Do you have the content? Do you have the images? Do you have the video? Do you have the tooltip, the right onboarding experience? Do you have the right email? Is the email instrumented? um, uh, is the team, customer support team, trained that a new feature has been launched, and the customers might expect some amount of effort, some amount of problems? Is the knowledge base updated? Is the FAQ section updated? Is the screenshots, are the screenshot on the website updated? There's so many things to actually do a checklist on, right? So to do a checklist, create it, and that itself will remove most of the pitfalls. And retrospect is a sacred ritual that you should follow without fail. Retrospects will help you improve. Otherwise, you'll keep doing the same mistake over and over again, and it lead you to nothing. So that's it for now. This is all about product release planning. What are the issues? What are the pitfalls? What are the aspects that you should be bothered about? Uh, and that's it for now. Thank you.